Before we get into the crazy details of this story and review the extreme sanctions placed on a US drone pilot, I want to make two very important points. Firstly, this ban from using any drones, which is what it is, has been issued following a lot of other enforcement actions that the court feel the pilot has ignored. Many of us are aware of the astounding proposed fine levels issued to the pilot involved in this case. That leads me onto my second important point before we discuss the story itself. This isn't about to happen to anyone else. Whether or not you agree with the drone regulations or even follow them, most people, when approached by police or enforcement from the airspace regulator, tend to stop what they're actually doing. Also, this is an extreme situation, potentially one which I feel could have actually been altered or halted in some way, because as of the last official hearing, it appears the defendant is still without any form of legal representation. Allowing any kind of prosecution, even under civil terms where that authority is unchecked by a good defense, is to me a bit of a problematic area. So please do not think that this is any kind of change to how the rules are being enforced. This is an extreme situation. Get out, fly, and enjoy your drones. Okay, so on with the story itself. As you can see here on an order issued by a court in Philadelphia, the drone pilot is prohibited from operation of any and all drones. Remember, this is even more extraordinary as it is not a sanction from the FAA, but passed down from a federal judge in a civil case acting against the drone pilot. So how did we get here precisely? Well, more widely, there has been ongoing enforcement action taken by the FAA against a drone pilot who flies in Philadelphia and then posts his content on a YouTube channel. There are several videos explaining the background, the long background to this story on this channel, including an interview with the man himself. All of this resulted in proposed fines of $182,000, and after a period of seemingly low levels of action, things have sprung into life again more recently, when federal authorities applying for and being granted a court order insisting that the drone pilot operates his drones in a legal manner. Recently, on the 24th of April, there was a follow-up hearing where personally, I expected there to not really be much action and actually expected to see a resolution and final judgment passed down of sorts. However, instead of this, the Assistant United States Attorney dealing with the case presented new evidence of a drone flight occurring on the 8th of April, showing the drone pilot flying his drone outside of regulations once again, this time using a DJI Mavic 3. This information we glean from the released court documents, the outcome of which is provided by the amended order issued by the court on the 25th of April. It finds that the defendant is found to be in civil contempt of the original court order. It stipulated the areas of breach and places some new sanctions which are confirmed, others requiring more information to the court. The sanction requiring more info is the government providing a letter brief containing a listing with as many identifiers as possible of the precise drones which the government wants to take possession of, including the Mavic 3 flown on April the 8th. The government are also asked to provide details of the plan for said seized drones and what will happen to them eventually. Interestingly, one of the areas that the judge has actually requested clarification on, so this could have an impact on in the order in the long term, is the legal authority allowing a court to order seizure of the drones as a sanction for civil contempt. Point 2 of the order is the big one for me, as it states very clearly in simple language, defendant is prohibited from operation of any and all drones. This appears to be a final attempt to deal with the situation in this civil action. Point 4 advises the defendant that the next stop could be more sanctions, including fines and even incarceration. So what are my thoughts on this case? It is something we've followed here for many years. The story is unique, as I was mentioning at the beginning of this video, and when you look at much of the content put out by many news agencies and the content creator himself, this has more recently become a very serious issue. On one hand, my mind tells me somewhere in the corner up there that this feels like a lot of enforcement against one person who is out flying their drone. As far as any public documentation released, the prosecuting authority in the civil action has not provided any details of injury, damage to property, or issues reported or created with other airspace users. So my first reaction when I received the evidence file showing the precise route and flight of the defendant's latest drone flight which certainly seems to be beyond a visual line of sight, was one of discomfort. Is this now something that is starting to feel like aggressive enforcement beyond the lines of public interest? After all, the named plaintiff in this action is the United States of America, so it should be public interest and safety that they are pursuing. Once that uncomfortable feeling is dealt with, you then have to look at the situation a little bit more reasonably. This drone pilot has been warned and sanctioned by the FAA and courts many times. We are very far down a multi-year rabbit hole of enforcement, leading to a situation where the authorities allege the defendant was still flying against regs and in breach of the first court order as recently as 8th of April. Although part of me feels uncomfortable about this enforcement level, certainly I would expect there to be hell to pay if the drone pilot flew his drone and struck a helicopter or other issues were caused. Then I'm sure we would be sat asking why authorities did not act. I think the geographical location has a part to play here. The location where the drone flights are occurring has, by my calculations, at least 3 reasons for there to be semi-permanent, if not permanent, counter-drone technology deployed. So it is likely that gathering this latest information would be almost routine for authorities. I do not think that a sting or equipment was deployed just to keep an eye on this one drone flyer. There is another aspect I am uncomfortable with concerning this action, something I have touched on before, but I think now it has a little bit more relevance. For whatever reason it has come about, and for whatever reason it continues, the defendant appears to be without any form of legal representation. Now, I am not wishing this was a criminal proceeding by any means, and there are clear advantages to this being a civil case for the defendant. However, being civil, they do not have the same access to legal counsel as they would have in the criminal system. Now, we cannot change the law or how action is taken to suit everyone, but for things to have gone this far without the system itself triggering to protect the defendant, as far as we can see, there may have been some action that we're unaware of, is something that I'm a little uneasy about. But that is obviously a personal feeling and opinion, and I know many people are very angry and feel more should have been done sooner to stop the actions of the drone flyer. I'm also left wondering how this story would feel and be reported if there was a robust defense, hitting back at some of the more outlandish claims and allegations put forward. Certainly, looking at most other cases involving FAA proposed fines, the eventual amount and type of infractions on the final docket are usually much lower than proposed. Overall, we do of course need to see our skies kept safe, and it is for the voters and legislators of each respected nation to find the balance that they are happy with. There's also an interesting situation around the wording of point 2 of the amended order. The very simple, clear language is extremely definitive. It could be argued that even flying a tiny whoop in a house would be prohibited by this order. I mentioned that for the legal eagles watching, as I'm sure it would not be enforced to anything like that level. I would expect this to be the final report on this particular story here on Geeksvana. I did end my last video by saying the same and pointed people towards the community tab for any final outcomes. However, I would not have expected this action by either party, with the alleged further drone flights or the plaintiff requiring more applications. So we shall wait and see. Sean out.